So, last night, I got a phone call. It's about 7:30 in the evening, and the voice on the other line says this is with Chime Security Services, and they asked my name. I said, yeah, this is me. They might have asked me for the last one of my social, I'm not sure. They said, have you authorized a transaction for $3,000, or did I make an authorized transaction or purchase for $3,000 in San Diego, California? So of course I'm like, no, because I'm here in Florida. And I'm like, no. So she starts to fill in with something or the other. But first off, she started off with her name, Stephanie, and then some kind of an employee ID number. And so, I'm like, okay. And then after the first one, so while she's whatever, checking into something, she comes back on the line. She says, Mr. McCormick, are you currently making a purchase for $400 in San Diego, California? It was for something or the other. I said, no, I just told you I'm right here at home in Florida. So I'm like, what's going on here? She said, okay, Mr. McCormick, we need to suspend your account right away. You need to go and lock all your cards. I'm like, okay. So I go and I do that. And I'm like, well, what now? I'm like, because it's most certainly, I didn't do this. And I'm like, well, so what kind of steps do we need to take here? She said, okay, so what we need you to do is you need to transfer all of your funds into one account, whatever account you choose, and make sure your card's locked. And we're going to do what's called a reverse transaction. I'm like, okay. And so I put all my stuff in my checking account. And then she says, all right, now what I need you to do is go to Pay Anyone and enter this for the search or whatever the person to send. That was a red flag right away. I'm like, what? I was like, what? How? I was like, I questioned that. I'm like, why would I have to go to Pay Anyone to do a reverse transaction? She says, Mr. McCormick, this is a time-sensitive issue. We need to do this. If we don't do this a certain amount of time, your account's going to be suspended. And I'm like, well, shouldn't it be suspended right now anyway? And she just, she kept pushing, and something didn't seem right. And I said, who are you again? And I asked her, and she said her name. And I asked her, how do I verify who you are? I was like, do you have a phone number I can call to verify, that you're an actual employee of Chime? And she says, Mr. McCormick, I'm with Chime Security Services, and we need to do this, or we're going to suspend your account, and you won't have access to your funds for 10 days. I said, well, that's all right. I was like, you know what? I was like, that's all right. I've got cash. I don't mind. And she said, so you don't mind if your account you can't get in your account for 10 days? I'm like, yeah, that's fine. In the meantime, I've gotten a text from Chime, something or the other. It just said Chime, and then it's something about a survey. I said, why am I getting a text from you right now? And she said, oh, that's just a survey to review our performance when this call is through. I'm like, oh, okay. And also, oddly enough, when I got into my Chime account, my biometric sign-in was not working, which I found to be strange. So she keeps pushing me that I need to, send this reverse transaction because it's time sensitive. They're gonna suspend my account for 10 days, and I was like, I'm not worried about it. Well, I was Googling. I started Googling because it just didn't seem right. And so I Googled Chime Security Services, and nothing came up. And so then I was like, And the first thing I came across after I Googled, does Chime call you if there's a problem with your account? And the first thing that came up, the very first thing says, Chime will never call you, just like the IRS. And I'm like, okay, the gig's up. And then they started talking about something about scams and texts, something of that nature. I read it. But also they were like, Chime will wait for you to call if there's a problem with your account, and it shows the phone number. And that didn't match the caller ID they were calling from. So, I was like, let me talk to one of your supervisors. So she puts me on hold. And mind you, whoever was on the other line was not very well spoken. They said a lot of uhs. They couldn't pronounce my name right, which is not a hard name to pronounce. And so she just concluded to call me Mr. Jim. And I'm like, that's odd. And so she puts me through to her supervisor, and he tells me the same thing. He tries to inform me that, this is a time-sensitive issue, and this has to be done. When they hang up the call, my account's going to be suspended. I was like, listen, man. I was like, who are you? And he says, oh, I'm such and such from Chime with Chime Security Services. I'm like, oh. I was like, well, you know what? I said, listen, my name's Jim. I'm the President of the United States. I'm like, do you believe that? And he's like, no, of course not. I'm like, well, how do you prove that I'm not? And he's like, well, what are you trying to say? I'm like, how do I prove who you are? And he just said, at this point in time, he says, he said, sir, I'm feeling verbally attacked right now. I feel as though you are verbally abusing me. I'm like, what are you talking about, man? I haven't raised my voice to you. I haven't cursed at you. I was like, don't be trying to pull some guilt trip on me, dude. I'm like, what is this all about? I'm like, who are you? And he's like, we are with Chime Security Services. I'm like, so you're with Chime. You're with Chime Banking. He said, no, we are a department of Chime. We're Chime Security Services. I'm like, man, I ain't never heard of such a thing. So at the end of the day, I didn't send that pay anyone thing. But, man, they were pushing. They literally, they were going to have me enter the entire amount of my checking account and to pay anyone and send it to something. It started with my name, and then it said ID, and then it had, some bullshit number after it. And it just didn't seem right to me, and I didn't send it. It's a scam. It's a big-time scam. So, and I hope, again, ironically enough, I had gotten my tax refund last night, and then I get this phone call, and that was another thing that just red flagged me. So I did my taxes through TurboTax, but I did it through the Cash App just because it was there and it was convenient. But yeah, it's a scam going around out there, and I'm going to tell you, man, they almost had me fooled. If that lady would have spoke with a bit of a calmer voice and didn't stutter and pronounce my name right, well, the pay anyone thing still would have red flagged me pretty good. But my point being is, there's a scam going around right now, and it just about got me. And I'm not claiming to be the sharpest tool in the shed, but I'm not an idiot either. Unfortunately, I the biggest thing is, if you get a call from Chime, they don't call you, number one. That's first and foremost. Secondly, what they do is they give you a sense of urgency right away, with the unauthorized purchase, and then one that's actively happening while you're on the phone with them. That's to get you off your rocker, so you start thinking impulsively. This has to be done now, and that's another thing with the time sensitive thing. If Chime were to call you, and it was actually Chime, if they needed to, they would stay on the phone with you all night if that's what it took to keep your account safe. No professional is ever going to tell you it's time sensitive. They try and scare you so you do something impulsive, but it's bullshit. It's a scam, and don't fall for it. If they were to call somebody, if they had callers with a little smoother with their script and a little firmer with what they were saying, or more confidence, it came close. So watch out, because it's out there. There might be some literature about it on the internet right now, or whatever, if you Google it. But it wasn't exactly what happened to me. They called me, and what I read was that you get a text from them, but they called me. So watch out. If you get a call from Chime, it's a scam. Don't fall for it. And I called them, reported them, but you know how long it takes and stuff before people get fully aware, or they don't exactly do public service announcements for things like this. So just be careful and watch out. If you have a Chime account, anybody that calls from Chime, it's not them. They don't call you. So just watch it, because that scam's out there, and they almost got me. So, all right.